Hey guys, welcome back to Team Death Slinger. My name is Peter, and today what I have for you is a SkullGreymon Rushdown deck. I've kind of been wanting to dip my toes in this since we got the BT17 White Greymon, and now with the Adventure Trait BT21 Skullgreymon, I feel like there's enough pieces that I want to give it a whirl, and this is the profile I wound up with. So, starting with our eggs, 4 copies of BT9 Koromon. Your turn. While this Digimon has Agumon or Greymon in its name, it gets 1k DP. That is going to matter for the Greymon when Digivolving the ability to delete something with as much or less DP as it. We want the 1k DP bonus because it can sometimes sneak us into the 12k range to pop level 6s, which is huge value when you evo into a level 4. We have 2 copies of the ST20 Agumon. Your turn. You can warp into a WarGreymon basically under certain conditions, which comes up sometimes. It is a reboot trait, and it does have the adventure trait. We care mostly about the adventure trait. We want something that we can actually play back with the SkullGreymon float effect for a 4-cost or lower adventure trait Digimon, but sometimes that warp effect will come up. We do have just the Blastace WarGreymons in this deck as a level 6, but this is mostly just SkullGreymons and Agumons. We have 4 copies of BT14 Agumon start of your main phase. If you have a Tamer with Tai Kamiya in its name, this Digimon may evo into a Greymon in your hand without paying the cost, and then it gives a 2k inheritable to a Greymon or Omnimon. The free evo is really, really nice. The 2k inheritable is really nice. This is kind of the best Agumon we have, and we love to see it when it comes up. We are then going to run 4 copies of the BT21 Agumon. On play, you may return a Digimon card with the Reptile or Dragonkin trait from trash to the hand, and then your turn, this Digimon gets 2k DP. We care only about the 2k DP bonus here. You could actually run the promo Agumon in this slot as well, but this does actually return some of the adventure trait cards to our hand. You can grab the Agumon, you can grab the Greymon. Most of the time it won't matter because we want them in trash for the float effect on the SkullGreymon anyways, but it is nice to have sometimes. Lastly, we're going to have 4 copies of the BT9 Agumon X Antibody. On play, and when Digivolving, you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 card with Greymon or Omnimon in its name, and 1 X Antibody among them to the hand. The rest go bottom deck. We won't have the X Antibody, but finding the Greymons is what we care about here. Finding level 4 to unbrick yourself is pretty relevant. It's also an extra source for the Greymon X Antibody effect when that does come up. Moving on to level 4, so we have 4 copies of BT21 Greymon. On play and when Digivolving, if you have Tai Kamiya or a Tamer with the adventure trait, give one of your opponent's Digimon start of your main phase. This Digimon attacks until their turn ends, has a reboot inheritable. Why do we care about this, you may ask? The Agumon Blastace can actually Blastace on an Agumon, so this can potentially set you up to do a play where you taunt one of your opponent's Digimon, they must attack, then you could evo into something like the BT14 Skullgreymon that pops itself on evo, you float back an Agumon, and now when your opponent is forced to attack on their turn, you can Blastace into the Agumon and potentially wind up in a really, really advantageous board state off of that play. That's why we're running 4 copies of this card. We are going to run 4 copies of the BT9 Greymon X Antibody as well. It has an inheritable that says when this Digimon with Greymon or Omnimon in its name would leave the battlefield by deletion or returning to hand or deck, you can trash 2 cards at the same level in this Digimon's sources to prevent it from leaving play. One small hiccup you might want to pay attention to here is that this Agumon cannot be evoed on top of. That is the only color conflict we kind of have going on here, but this works on everything else. Basically, if we're going to raid in with our BT21 Skullgreymon, because it gets raid retail, we want to make sure that we are protected from any Blastace shenanigans, and this is going to get the job done and keep us relatively safe from any unwanted deletion effects to make sure we can get that raid retail off. Lastly, 4 copies of BT17 Greymon. When Digivolving, if this Digimon's name is Koromon, this Digimon gets 3k DP for the turn, and then delete one of your opponent's Digimon with as much or at less DP as this Digimon. That's why we care about the 1k bonus. That's why we care about the 2k bonus. That's going to give this plus 6k overall, which makes it an 11k. That pops the lower levels of level 6 Digimon sitting at 11k DP. All turns, this Digimon gets all names of the level 3 or lower cards in its Digivolution card, so this is treated as a Koromon and an Agumon, which leads to some weird interactions where you can actually evo like Agumon X Antibody on top of this. And then on deletion, you can play a Tamer card with Tai Kamiya or Kari Kamiya in its name from your hand without paying the cost or hatch in your breeding area. The inheritable will do the same thing for you. We really care about playing a Tai with that because we can sequence the effects with this SkullGreymon here. So this SkullGreymon says when Digivolving, by trashing a card in your hand, delete one of your Digimon with the lowest level and one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest level. On deletion, you can play an Agumon from your trash without paying the cost. And if you have a Tamer with Tai Kamiya in its name, that Digimon gets rushed for the turn. If you have this on top of a stack with BT17 Greymon, you can actually play the Tai Kamiya first, and then you play the Agumon, it gets rushed, and then you can swing in for your aggro. Huge source of damage with this card, and we kind of get to 2 for 1 here by deleting one of our opponent's Digimon with this Digimon, and then getting a Tamer and a rush Agumon that just opens you up to do a lot of fun stuff, especially with the Agumon Bonds in this deck. We also do have 4 copies of the new BT21 Skullgreymon. On play and when digivolving, one of your Digimon gets Raid and Retaliation until your opponent's turn ends. Huge, huge, huge effect. I can't understate enough how people usually aren't prepared for a Raid Retail to come just right into whatever their stack is. You can trade really favorably into some overflow with this card, and then on deletion, you get to play an adventure trait card with a play cost of 4 or less from your trash without paying the cost. The Inherited will do the same thing if that does come up, but you are primarily floating back this BT21 Greymon or the ST20 Agumons when you resolve that effect. So that is also going to assert some offensive pressure and allow you to get some fun trades in. We do have 2 copies of WarGreymon Ace as our sole level 6 in the deck. I was originally running without level 6s. It felt weird to be running level 6s in what should be a SkullGreymon deck, but there were situations where having this card came up. It was important to be able to warp into it with the Agumon. There's some situations where you're just kind of at the awkward security where you can't exactly Agubond without getting punished, or actually Agubond in time to stop the opponent from winning the game. So we did put in 2 copies of ST20 WarGreymon Ace on play and when digivolving until your opponent's turn ends. For every 2 colors your tamers have, their Digimon's effects don't affect one of your Digimon. So as long as you have 2 colors on the board, you can give this Digimon immunity to effects. And then when digivolving and when attacking, you delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest DP. That can be really, really nice considering we have some SkullGreymon and Greymon deletion effects that are going to trim the lower DP bodies off the board anyways. They should usually be in a position where this is going to hit whatever their primary stack is on the board. Speaking of level 7s here, we have 1 copy of the BT6 Agumon. When attacking, if you have a tamer in play, delete one of your opponent's Digimon 13k DP or less, and then your turn when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, trash the top card of their security. Why are we bothering to run 1 copy of Agumon from BT6? That is because sometimes when you warp into this, if you have to warp into something, you don't want to warp into the Agumon with Blast Ace because you'll suffer from the overflow if you have more than 3 security. And in order to avoid dealing with that, we're going to run this Agumon. If you give an Agumon Rush and then have to warp it into Agumon to delete something that you really can't delete otherwise, you're at least not going to get penalized with the overflow with this card. And then we do have 2 copies of the LM Agumon. It can evo on an Agumon for 3 as long as you have 2 or fewer security cards. That's kind of the awkward security threshold we were talking about. And then on play when digivolving, you delete up to this Digimon's DP total worth of your opponent's Digimon with the 2k bonus. That should be 16k. When attacking, if you have a tamer, trash your opponent's top security card. Really awesome aggro piece for this deck. We do have 2 copies of Our Courage United from ST20. We are running black tamers. It's really not hard to resolve the color requirement for this card. You're going to draw 2 cards, and when any of your level 5 or higher Digimon would leave the battle area, you delay. You can play a level 5 or lower Digimon card with the adventure trait from your hand without paying the cost. Now, you might be thinking we don't have enough adventure trait for that to be effective. This deck chugs. You're going to find lots of pieces. I actually almost decked out in some of my first play sessions with this deck. You are very frequently going to have an Agumon, a Greymon, or even a SkullGreymon to play off of that effect, and just drawing 2 cards is a really, really nice middle ground search option for this deck considering how many different colors we have. We just don't really have a consistent search method for this deck, and it also lets us apply offensive pressure by floating the body back anyways. Worst case, it lets you draw 2 and you whiff on the delay effect, but I still like drawing 2 cards, so I'm really fine with it in this slot. For our tamers, 3 copies of BT12 Tai Kamiya. Start of your main phase. On play, one of your Digimon with Agumon or Greymon in its name gets 1k DP and gains blocker until the end of your opponent's turn. Some nice defensive pressure. The 1k DP comes up with the ST17 Greymon, or sorry, BT17, not ST. Brings it up to a 12k body or higher, depending on how many copies of this card you have in play. And then you can pop potentially really any level 6 on the board with that. And when one of your Digimon digivolves into a card with Greymon or Omnimon in its name by suspending this tamer, gain 1 memory. Some memory efficiency for us, giving us memory back on the Evo. Make sure that we can actually stay in the game and make plays, despite not having any memory setters in this deck. We are also going to have 3 copies of the BT6 Tai Kamiya. When one of your Digimon with the Agumon or Greymon in its name moves from the breeding area to the battle area, you gain a memory and trigger draw 1. And then main, once per turn, you can digivolve your Agumon into an Agumon in its hand for the cost, ignoring its level. If you do, you trash the top 2 cards of your security stack. Then if you have 1 or more security cards, delete that Digimon end of turn. This is why we have the BT6 Agumon. This is what I was talking about with that awkward security threshold. If you don't have a way to clear the board after playing a Rush Agumon, sometimes you have to warp into the Agumon and you don't want to warp into the Blast Ace because you're going to overflow and that feels really bad. So being able to warp into the old Agumon, swing the Rush check, and then delete something off of the when attacking trigger serves the purpose it needs to. And then if you have to delete it because you have more than 1 security, you're okay. You don't have to pay the overflow at least. Then our last tamer here is going to be 3 copies of Analog Youth from EX1. On play, reveal top 3. Add a Digimon among them to your hand. Trash the rest. Best way to find our Greymon, hands down. And this all turns effect when one of your level 5 or higher Digimon with sources is deleted. You can suspend this tamer and gain a memory and hatch an egg in an empty space. Synergizes incredibly well with our SkullGreymon strategy. We are trying to pop a level 5 in order to do things, and this is just going to let us hatch an egg and then keep evoing in the back to get more gas and more aggro on the board. So that is what I have for BT21 Skullgreymon Rushdown, Agumon, whatever you want to call it. But that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Have you tried playing the Agumon strategy with the new BT21 support? Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Thank you to our channel members for supporting this channel. It's people like Langlong, Big Z11, Coffee Deus, and DigiDane who make videos like this possible.